Okay, everybody is muted. Joe, if you'll push *6, it will unmute you.
I pushed it. I'm all set.
All right. Are you in your car?
I am in my car right now. Yeah, I just got back from talking to somebody who is dealing with, surprisingly, a Common Core issue.
What do you know?
Yeah.
We just had another great post from a mom who had her pediatrician. The pediatrician is catching on.
Oh, really?
This is becoming an issue. Yeah, they're starting to realize that things that are happening in the school are really kind of making things worse for a lot of kids that wouldn't normally have had problems, and those who had them to begin with they're just magnifying them and making them worse.
It really is.
So I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna let Joe talk about what he is seeing in kids in Georgia. Joe is a counselor and has his own business and has been seeing kids for the last, what do you say, Joe, maybe a year, 2 years?
About a year.
About a year.
Yeah.
With extreme anxiety, stress issues, depression, all kinds of really manifestations of frustration levels that that are probably being starting in the classroom. We can't obviously say that this is something caused by Common Core, but it certainly is something that's being fed by it in many, many different levels. So welcome to those who are just joining us, and I am going to turn it over to you, Joe. Please be careful driving.
Oh, I'm fine, yeah. Really, the problem I see with Common Core right now, where I am seeing, is it's interesting because Meg's absolutely right. This is affecting the high-performing kids as well as the lower-performing kids, and typically they react. I'm starting to notice a trend with the kids who are in the gifted class or upper-level classes. They tend to react with a lot of anxiety and depression. The kids that are maybe, I would say, regular classes and below, they tend to react with anger. And I'm seeing both sides. Obviously, there are situations where you can get just the opposite. But that's kind of the general trend. And from all the kids, I'm hearing that they're not understanding their schoolwork, that their teacher is not helping them. And it's a real problem. I just came back from talking to a kid, and I'm withholding the name and the description just to keep confidence. But this is a young person who is in upper level classes, and particularly wants to be an engineer in upper level math, and said that he was incredibly frustrated and really wonders whether he's going to be able to get into a good college or not, because he had his eye on Georgia Tech, but now he's just wanting to get into what he called a regular college, because the math itself does not make sense to him at all, and his father is an engineer and is having a hard time understanding it himself. And what I was saying to the House subcommittee about Common Core was I'm starting to see that there is a separation between the parents, the teachers, and the kids. When we were going to school, there was a good bond between all three, where the parents and teachers were on the same page, that if a child was stuck on any sort of school assignment, then the parents could call the teacher called the parents, and they could get the instruction clear. Or even if they weren't able to talk to the teacher, the subject was about the same, math, for example, was the same as they had learned. So it was much easier for them to be able to help their child learn the material. Unfortunately, as it was with this child, then he was not able to get help from his parents and at all to him. And so we have the kid that has tried marijuana for the very first time, and he's feeling very depressed, has contemplated suicide. He's not at that point right now, but he said that he just doesn't really see a good future for himself at all. And so the parents are thinking of possibly going to a private school in order to try and get away from Common Core. The problem is there are some private schools that are now adopting this as well. So let me just kind of discuss what I'm seeing as far as the separation between the parents, the child, and the teacher. The other side is the teachers are not comfortable with the material they're teaching. I'm working with a teacher, and she was rated this year on her teaching ability. She's been teaching for about 15 years and already received 3s and 4s. The scale is 1 to 4, where 4 is the highest you can get. And she said she didn't get anything less than a 3 for 14 years of teaching. This is the very first year where she received a 2. And she tends to be a bit of a perfectionist, so she's really struggling with her self-worth as well. And apparently this new rating system is tied to the performance in Common Core. She teaches a special needs classroom. And she said what happened was the administrators came in and happened to catch her at a point where she was teaching a remedial topic. Because she noticed that the kids were deficient in whatever knowledge they had to have in that topic. And they came in, and she was marked down for not having a curriculum that was very rigorous. And so she's feeling a lot of anxiety. I hear teachers that are saying they don't agree with this. In fact, there was one teacher who said, how can I defend something when I know I agree with the parents? She was given talking points in order to explain Common Core to the parents. And really what this is coming down to, according to a teacher, is if they do not have a certain number of kids participating in this, then they're going to be losing federal funding, the Race to the Top program. And so a lot of this is driven by money rather than education of the kids. Parents are getting frustrated because they're not able to see any textbooks, understand any of the lessons. So they feel completely in the dark, and I know that's true of my son as well. And he was, for instance, in an English class, and the teacher gave him an assignment based on a poem and said, I want you to find a theme. Well, the theme that he stated, the poem itself is We Wear the Mask. And it's about the struggle with African Americans trying to make it in a white world and having to hide what they were truly feeling. Well, the theme he came up with was be a good person. And she said that was the wrong theme, and that what the answer was is be yourself. And my wife has graduated in the top 5% of her class in English, so we took a look at that, and she agreed that if he could defend it, then why would he not get a higher grade? But that's where Common Core comes in, because he was not, and kids from junior high on up are not learning how to think critically. They're told to spit back what they're told. So they have to essentially guess what the teacher is thinking, and the teacher is probably reading out of a Common Core textbook herself or himself. So that's a big problem, and it really points to just the struggle within the student. That cognitively, the reason why kids a lot of times make very impulsive decisions and tend to struggle with emotions is because they make most of their decisions based on the limbic system of their brain, which is the emotional part of their brain. The front part of their brain is where we all get the reasoning skills. We can plan out things so we can meet whatever needs we have. That's not really well developed in kids. Elementary school kids, it's not developed very much at all, but middle school on up, it's further developing. And according to how development would go, kids in elementary school would be learning more rote, where they're supposed to recite things and repeat them back on tests. Whereas when they get into junior high on up, then they're to learn reasoning skills, to be able to argue and present their perspectives in a way that makes sense. And the two are flip-flopped now, where kids in elementary school are being challenged to think critically, having to do abstract reasoning skills, which their brains are not able to do at that age. And then when it comes to junior high on up, the problem they have there is they're being expected to spit back what they're being taught rather than trying to practice abstract reasoning skills, which is absolutely essential, not only at that point, but later on in life. And as a result of that, you have a lot of stress with kids. The elementary school kids don't have brains that can understand what's being taught to them or what they're being asked to do. And then you have the upper level kids who have the ability to reason, who are just itching to try and prove what their argument is, and they're not being challenged to do that. And that's why I bring up the example of my son, is if he could defend that theme, then that would be showing him how to think critically. But taking an abstract lesson like that and having to spit back a particular answer that is just the opinion of one person doesn't help him develop that skill at all.
So I agree, Joe. When I was teaching even 7th grade, we were expecting that high level of thought process to be happening with them, and their brains were not yet at a place where they could do that, and so the levels of frustration just continued to grow.
Yes. So you have kids in elementary school that are now saying things like, I want to go away, or I want to escape. Some kids are playing around with cutting, and I'm talking about 4th and 5th graders. And what that's saying is they feel so much stress, they're not able to deal with it in a way that they can have any sort of resolution. They're going to their parents. Well, as parents, we're going to try and make our child feel secure, confident, and comfort them. But when we don't know what's being taught or understand it ourselves, then that leaves a child thinking that nobody can help them. And ultimately, well, a teacher is telling me I can do this, but I can't seem to do it, so there must be something wrong with me. And then you have the kids in the upper level classes that are feeling depressed and angry because they're being expected to do something that doesn't make sense to them. If they're being given assignments that require them to, on the surface, require abstract reasoning, but the answer is to be given in rote, then you have a lot of confusion there. And those kids are talking about suicide and just being so frustrated and hopeless that they're not sure what to do. Kids missing out on going to colleges or looking at their futures and feeling like they're not able to accomplish what they're able to do, that we know that they can do. So overall, everybody is feeling a very high sense of frustration, the parents, the teachers, and the kids that get all mixed up in this. So it's just not good at all. And the problem I have is so many people are focused on the educational side of things that they're neglecting to take a look at the psychological ramifications of this whole program that they're trying to implement.
What are you seeing down the road? If we can't stop this, we continue to hear developmentally inappropriate, and you spoke to what that actually means when it comes to the brain. But what happens with the brain, and what's going to happen to these kids down the road? We're looking at officially having Common Core in every school in the state of Georgia now for a year. This has been our first official year. Some counties have had it up to 3.5 years, depending on whether or not they were one of the original 26 Race to the Top counties. What is going to happen? We're cutting school counselors, or we're turning our counselors into career coaches more so than being counselors anymore. We're getting rid of our school nurses. We're getting rid of our libraries. We're getting rid of our music and our art, all in the name of grit and rigor, my favorite word. What are we looking at down the road if this doesn't stop?
Well, I think we're going to, if you're not learning anything, then you're never going to build a muscle that's necessary. So you have a lot of kids that are basically being taught to underperform. So I think we're going to be developing two different classes. We have the kids that are not going to be learning the Common Core lessons, and then we're going to have another group of kids that are being taught Common Core. Well, the kids who are not being taught according to Common Core standards are going to have those abilities to think abstractly, to be challenged, to do things that they may not at the time think they can do, but they're at a developmental point where they're able to be successful, and they feel satisfied that they were able to overcome a barrier because there is a solution for it. The kids that are learning according to the Common Core standards will not have that challenge. They will be in a state of frustration where they're eventually depending on somebody else to give them the answer because that's what's happening in class right now. I would love to be able to learn how to think abstractly and argue my point, but if I'm never taught that, then I need to turn to somebody else to give me the answer for it. So it's just interesting how this is all set up, because you have two classes, and one is going to be the group that is basically in leadership positions, and then you have the rest who are going to be the lower workers and to be depending on those in the upper class to give directions to the what we would call lower class, I guess, in the work terms.
The worker bees.
Yeah, essentially the worker bees. I mean, I had heard part of the curriculum based on the standards is to have reading assignments that are basically learning government brochures or learning how to answer government forms. I don't, of course, understand that, but it really leads me to believe that is an intent there. So that's what I see as the future. I think that there are generally going to be a lot of kids that are going to feel frustrated, and kids turn to escape in order to get away from that. I think that we can see an increase in the number of kids that are abusing drugs and alcohol, becoming dependent on other things to try and fill that gap and help them feel good, where they would be able to feel good by being challenged and having a solution to an assignment that's developmentally appropriate for them. And ultimately, I think it's going to affect the families as well, because we have parents that are going to have a hard time understanding the material, and a kid who is maybe underperforming, and you have parents that will start to believe, well, I guess my child is just not as gifted as I thought. Not that they're disappointed in that child as a person, but they're definitely disappointed that the child is not able to maybe follow through on a dream of theirs. Somebody has the capability of, maybe if they want to become a lawyer, they have the capability of doing that, but they're not being taught in a way that's going to help them reach that point.
Can anyone hear me?
I can.
Hello? Hi, this is Alex. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I was a late arrival, so I apologize for my for my lateness. Can I ask a question, or just make an observation?
Alex, can you hold just a second? I actually have everybody muted right now. I don't know why you're not. I'm going to let Joe finish talking, and then we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other concern that I have is really the tinfoil hat.
Joe, if you'll *6 yourself again, I tried to remute everyone.
Okay, can you hear me?
There you are. Sorry about that.
Okay. No, that's okay. So the concern I have is the what's actually behind all this. And I'm not one to wear a tinfoil hat whatsoever. But the more I'm talking to the kids and parents and learning myself about this, it just seems as though right now the perspective is to try and gather as much information as possible in order to put together a curriculum that is going to be taught nationwide. So we pulled our kids out of the testing. It's called the Georgia Milestones here, and received. One of my son's principal was very nice and understood, and my daughter's was not.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. And what they were told is they had to be offered the test, which in my mind meant that they were asked to take it, and they're given the choice as to whether or not they want to do that. Well, what was explained to me is they would have to sit in front of a computer screen, and the test would last 3 to 4 hours. They would have to sit in front of a computer screen. They could not have any other materials to work on. They would basically be sitting there. And I told the woman I was speaking to at the school board that if I heard of if I heard of a parent that was having their child sit in front of a computer screen for hours as a consequence, and not only have it for one day, but the test lasted 9 days, so 3 to 4 hours over a 9-day period of time, that's where I would probably call DFACS, which is CPS, Child Protective Services here in Georgia, because it would seem abusive, psychologically abusive, because it's basically putting a child into a situation where they're coerced to taking the test, and it doesn't seem to matter at all, which is a concern. So I think with all the money that's going into this, I think they're trying to develop a curriculum, and then ultimately it's going to be copyrighted and taught in the nation, where every child is going to have to learn this, except for those that can afford an upper tier education, and everybody will be the same. So I told the principal that he's essentially going to eventually lose control in how to help kids learn. So that's a big concern I have.
You hit on this just a quick second, and I hope I'm not calling anyone out, but I know that you had a conversation with one of your kids' principals over an accusation that you were pulling them out of testing because it was too much of a challenge for them. And I hear this a lot from parents too, who question the opt-out movement and say that, well, by opting them out, you're telling them that when the going gets tough, they should just give up. And you were also accused of this by one of the principals. Can you address how you feel this level of stress? Kids knowing that their performance is attached to their teachers' jobs. What is that doing to kids right now?
Well, I know my son felt an incredible amount of stress, where he was just having a hard time sleeping. My daughter was in tears because she didn't understand what was being taught, and so they were worried that when they're taking this test, they're not going to be able to perform. And my kids get straight A's in upper level classes, so they're used to making pretty good marks. But they were concerned about that they're not going to be able to perform in a way that they're used to performing. And yes, the principal wrote my wife and said that because we had asked to have her removed, and he said, well, I hope that you're not planning on protecting your daughter from any future challenges as you are right now. So it was just insulting, and with what I understand of Common Core, I don't really see it as challenging whatsoever as far as the test goes. It's just something that's so foreign, and they're not being taught in how to put the test together, that I don't see how anybody can really feel good about what they're doing or actually achieve something academically as a result of taking it.
Agreed. I think one of my concerns during the whole opt-out process, besides that kind of bullying, was the bullying going on. You had talked about the child had to be given the opportunity to test, and in doing that, they were basically putting an authority figure in front of a young child, and the authority figure was telling them what they were supposed to do. So opting out or having the child refuse this authority figure put them in a horrible, horrible position. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, it really does. You do have some teachers that have told the kids they have to show up because their attendance means that they're doing a good job as a teacher, and so they will be able to be kept on as a good teacher. There are schools that are throwing ice cream parties and other incentives just for taking the test, and if you don't take the test, then you're not able to participate in that. You have to go to some other part of the school and do, I have no idea what they're going to do, but do something else that's certainly not fun. The other thing is you have a lot of anger on the part of teachers, rightly so, because they're not being instructed on how to teach this stuff. And we've had reports of teachers yelling at kids because I think they're asking questions about how to do things. The teachers may not be able to understand it. And the other thing is that the teacher knows that they don't feel equipped to teach. So they wind up getting frustrated. And so you have emotions that are boiling over between the kids and the teachers.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, and the numbers of teachers who are leaving is just, I mean, Georgia is hemorrhaging teachers right now, and I know that Cobb County alone is looking at a retirement number in the 700s when their normal retirement numbers is down in the 300s. So, on top of those who are in a place where they can retire, there are also a lot of teachers who are leaving for health problems, health issues. Can you hit a little bit more on the developmental inappropriateness? There was a paper released recently by the National Association of the Education of Young Children, trying to say in a roundabout way that it's not the standards, it's the implementation. Of course, we know that it's both, but they are obviously being paid by Pearson to come out and say that the standards are, in fact, not developmentally inappropriate. And what I want to get to is, when you have children who are experiencing these toxic levels of stress and toxic levels of frustration, what is that doing to their brains on a physical level?
On a physical level, when we feel stress, our body releases a chemical called cortisol. And cortisol is a good thing to have when you're running away from a hungry panther. But it's meant to last for a short period of time. It's not meant to last for a long period of time. And the reason for that is it's basically acidic. And while it's in your bloodstream, it's actually stripping away part of the blood vessels in there. Now, your blood vessels will build up once again. However, and it's in the book, I encourage everybody to read it, called Anger Kills, because it ties to stress directly, is that when there is a prolonged exposure to cortisol, that's where people are being put at risk for heart disease, for problems in the circulatory system in their brain, the functioning. So that's certainly a huge health risk as well when kids are being exposed, and others too, exposed to the high degree of stress that they're encountering. And it's impossible to avoid that stress when you're being taught something that's not developmentally appropriate where your brain is physically. And I agree with you, Meg. I don't know how you separate standards and curriculum. Usually, I'm not a teacher, but my thinking is curriculum is based on trying to meet the standards that are developed. So anyway, that's the concern that I have physically as a result of all the stress that you're experiencing.
Well, I tell you, George is in an even more unique spot in that McGraw-Hill, who wrote our tests, is also specifically mentioned in the copyright for Common Core. So they sat at the table when it was written, and now they are writing the test. So obviously we know that they are controlling what happens in between as well. Can you talk a little bit to kids with special needs? I know that you're working with a teacher right now who works with kids with special needs, but what we're seeing is a lot of special needs kids who are being forced to both learn and test at grade level rather than the level where they are functioning. And you know, what kind of impact are we causing on kids who are already starting out with a challenge?
Yeah, that's where the kids are hit most, I think, and they are called special. And I have a special needs child, and they're called special needs because they do have unique ways of learning, unique ways of thinking and doing things. And special education teachers have the challenge of trying to figure out what is the best way for this child to learn material. And so one of the things that they do is they take a look at what is the best learning style or the mode which is most helpful for this child to learn. Do they learn visually? Do they learn better orally? Do they learn better kinesthetically? And taking a look at how the child performs the best and how what's happening during that time as far as how it's being taught, and then really zeroing in on teaching future lessons according to that learning style and mode that's helpful for that child to learn so it can be successful. And the standards themselves don't address this at all. It's simply for kids that have the ability to read a book or listen to a teacher and to be able to get the right answer. Well, I know a kid that I've been working with about a year ago who was very bright, and however, he has a very difficult time understanding material if he just listens to it. He actually has to write it down on paper, and then he can understand the material. And when he understands the material, he gets great grades. Well, when he's being forced into learning a way that doesn't really match his learning style or the best way that he can learn, then he's less likely to be successful. So we have special needs kids that, according to the way the standards are currently, that they're less likely to be able to learn something that they need to learn. And whenever I can tell you this from personally, a special needs child feels anxiety, they feel it at a level that's much higher than people who do not have special needs, because they don't have generally the skills to manage that emotion in a healthy way. So I think that we're going to have a lot of kids in special needs classes that are going to be left behind because they're being forced into a box and told to learn something in a way that they cannot learn or perform at a level they would normally be able to if their teacher was able to teach according to what he or she knows is the best way to teach a child.
I had a question and it's gone. We're seeing a huge increase in the numbers of kids being diagnosed with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if there may be a link to the behaviors that are typical of ADHD and the behaviors that kids may use to cope with the levels of stress and frustration that they are feeling while learning under Common Core.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the reason why there's an increase is because if you take the manual for mental disorders and you put ADHD right alongside a general anxiety disorder, you're going to see a strong correlation between the two. So the symptoms are going to be very similar. Everybody can identify with this. When you're nervous or anxious, you're less likely to be able to focus. You're more likely to make an impulsive decision or do something that's impulsive you later regret. You have a lot of difficulty focusing on things around you, and so those are symptoms that correlate between the two. So I think essentially what's happening is there are kids that are being misdiagnosed as having ADHD when what they have is an anxiety disorder. And it makes sense because when the kids are at school and learning in a way that is not bettering them, that they're going to feel more anxious and they're going to appear to have ADHD to the teacher and, of course, be taken to a psychiatrist or doctor and be given medication that may not be necessary. I have kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD, and I treat them as I would a kid with anxiety, and you see an improvement in their ability to focus. So that really shows that this kid was misdiagnosed as having ADHD when, in fact, he had an anxiety disorder.
Yeah, that's a great fear of mine. I'm seeing that more and more, especially with second and third, fourth graders who are being diagnosed and being medicated, who probably are just experiencing the types of things that you're seeing in the classroom. I'm seeing a lot of high-functioning kids that are shutting down, like you were saying. What can you tell parents who are seeing maybe not the cutting, but maybe the pulling of the hair, pulling out of the eyebrows, pulling out of the eyelashes, in behavior at home, and are trying to make that link. And I think that's something that we need to continue to work on with our medical community in helping to diagnose these kids and diagnose them correctly. There's not many who are making that link yet. That there's something going on at school that's causing this, not necessarily something going on at home. But parents are seeing these behaviors in their house. I mean, what is their first, besides a call to you, what is their first, what is the very, very first thing a parent can do for a child who's experiencing this level of frustration?
Well, I would say the first thing is you know your child pretty well. Find something that's a real strength of theirs and participate in that with them. And while you're doing this activity with them, start up the conversation about how they feel at school, or it doesn't have to be just school either. It could be other things going on in their life. Because a lot of kids feel very uncomfortable when they're sitting face-to-face with somebody, even if it's their parent. And they're much more comfortable when there's some form of distraction that's there. For instance, if you have a child that's an artist, sitting down and doing an art project with them and weaving in questions about what's going on at school, how they feel about themselves, what are their frustrations, and you can point to if a child is pulling their hair, pointing that out and saying, I'm kind of concerned about what I'm seeing right now. Does that seem to be something that concerns you? Essentially, when kids are cutting or pulling hair, what they're trying to do is gain a sense of control when they don't feel any control. And it's an unhealthy way of doing that. So by meeting with your child, talking through things, it's helping them to learn a better way of resolving some of that anxiety or that frustration that they're feeling. The other thing I would do is really limit the amount of electronics that they have, because that simply adds stress to the whole situation. Putting limits on phones, on video games, because that just adds to the problem. And of course, find a really good therapist, because there are going to be limitations on what you can do, not just because of maybe not having the education behind it. But the other thing is your mom and dad, and so having a third party in there can sometimes help resolve the situation a little differently.
Well, we know that schools aren't stepping up to the plate like they should be. What questions can a parent ask a therapist to see if the therapist gets it? Like we were saying, there's still a big disconnect. I mean, there are still a huge number of people in the medical community and one of the things that we want to address over the summer, now that testing is winding down, we want to be able to address the larger medical community, at least in our state, and let them know that these types of things are happening in the classroom, and that these types of things are being seen. But how can we find those therapists that understand what's going on in the classroom?
Well, I think, asking them about their experience, what are they seeing coming out of the classrooms right now? So if you're bringing in a child, for instance, that has problems with anxiety, mentioning, boy, it seems like she's much more frustrated in the classroom than she's ever been before. Are you seeing this in other kids right now? And I know that I've been answering, yes, I have seen it in many more kids over the past year. And your child is not alone. And just opening up the conversation about school, sitting in with your child, because when you're taking your child to a counselor, I think it's important for a parent to be there just to kind of facilitate the conversation. But I think helping to open up that door and just saying, what's going on in the classroom? Do you feel really frustrated in the classroom? And if that therapist is really keying in on things such as saying, yes, what I'm seeing, or are you having problems understanding the material where you understood it before? Yes. Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about that? What is making it really hard this year from last year? When I've asked that of kids, that's where they've brought up the statement that the math doesn't make sense. That last year, 3 times 6 was 18, and this year you take the 6, you break it down into 2 times 3, and I don't know exactly how they do it, but
no one does.
But being able to get a good sense that this therapist or doctor is seeing similar things in a child, and trying to figure out, are they asking questions to try and support the child in saying, what you're feeling right now is perfectly understandable given what I've heard from other kids, Or are they explaining it away and saying, well, I know that, they have a switch, and it sounds like it's a good thing for there to be a switch because it's going to be challenging you a whole lot more. That's somebody who really hasn't really done a lot of work in researching this, or it may just be somebody who hasn't worked with a lot of kids in general.
Yeah, we see that too. All right, I want to open things up to questions. I have everybody muted, so if you want to ask a question, if you will hit *6 and ask your question, and then hit *6 again, that will remute you so we don't get any background noise, since we are trying to record this. So I will open up the floor to anyone who would like to *6 themselves and ask Joe a question.
Did I chase anybody away?
Alex, where are you? He's disappeared. All right, anybody else? *6? Or here, wait. All right, everybody's unmuted. You can jump in and ask. Anybody have a question for Joe?
Well, I have a question. I've been noticing the last few years that there's a growing distance between the parents, the schools and the parents. And you touched on this earlier about how they're just not together like they were when we were going to school. I'm not sure how to overcome that, but I know for sure it's not good for my son that I can't seem to talk to them about it. I get stonewalled every time I have a Common Core issue. I just get the whole, it's just more rigorous. This is what they need. I have a tag student who gets straight A's and is in the most challenging classes, and yet I don't feel any kind of connection with the school anymore. I'm to the point now where I feel irresponsible for having him in public school.
I could understand. I'm hearing that from a lot of other parents as well. And in all honesty, people don't really have a lot of the resources to go to the private schools. I think in this economy, everybody's been struggling. But I think that there are teachers that are supportive of parents and questioning the Common Core standards. In fact, I'd be willing to bet probably majority of the teachers out there do not like these standards, but they feel intimidated and they're scared of asking or being of actually questioning the Common Core standards. But if you can meet with them privately, you can talk to them on the phone, or even go and visit the school and tell them that you're on the same side as they are, that this is very tough, and see what you can do to help, and then sitting down with the teacher and coming up with ways to help, because I truly believe the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that means that it puts some parents in a bad position because they might need to go to work and don't have very much time to go to the school. But I think it's important for parents to sit down with the child and the teacher and say, he's not getting it. Let's go over this. And you tell me, you teach me while you're teaching him. And so those are for the teachers that are pro Common Core. But the ones that are scared and don't agree with Common Core, I think if the parents go in and really support that teacher, empathize that they're in a difficult position, and is there any way that they can try different ways of teaching this child while accomplishing maybe some of the same goals, and that you have their full support in doing that, as well as getting some information from them on what you can do at home. Because I found that teachers, they are scared right now, but if they feel like they have an advocate or somebody who believes the way they do, they're more likely to open up. And I think that's really important because teachers really do need to be supported right now.
And that I think that's one of our biggest goals and also one of our biggest challenges, because it's easy for parents to want to lash out at those teachers who are in that situation for not being more vocal and not standing up and saying no, but they are still trying to put food on their own tables, and we're trying to, at Georgians to Stop Common Core as well as Opt Out Georgia, make sure that the teachers know that that they're being supported, and that we know that this is not their fault. It certainly didn't come from them. Certainly wasn't written by them either. And I'm seeing a lot of parents having trouble with kids learning to backtalk them, or almost give them permission to backtalk their own parents by their teachers.
Oh,
in other
really?
words, teachers telling kids that their parents are wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's coming home, and the kids are being confrontational with their parents, telling their parents that they're stupid and they don't understand and they're wrong based on what the teachers are saying. So it really has caused a huge divide between parents and schools. And it's really scary to me for the kids who don't have parents who are in a position to be necessarily paying attention, or parents who are continuing to say, this is just another set of standards. This will go away. This is just going to cycle through, or parents who aren't necessarily doing the levels of research that a lot of our parents are. It really worries me that it is continuing to pit teachers and administrators against parents rather than working together. Does anybody else have a question? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we also have the Alinsky method working, where the parents that are questioning are being marginalized and demonized, and the tinfoil hat wearers.
Oh yeah,
it's very hard as a parent to speak out about that, because the schools are not appreciative of that in the least, and other parents, I'm just finding it hard to do that. And the other thing I noticed from the school is, the schools, the teachers that are leaving are the ones that have had some longevity, that have been around since before this and see how bad this is. The newer teachers went to college with this. My own daughter went and got an early education degree, and she's fine with Common Core because this is what she learned. She doesn't understand my problem with it, but she doesn't have the perspective of somebody that's been around a lot longer.
And that's what we're seeing too. Is the more seasoned teachers are the first ones that are leaving, and they love the young ones, not only because they're cheaper, but because they're easier to manipulate and
they're
mold.
Compliant. That's right.
And a lot of these schools are, a lot of the administration we found through the whole testing season, the lack of communication from the BOE, from the state, at the state level to the districts, was upsetting. They were either being blatantly lied to, or they were being misled by omission. They weren't being told the whole truth. And so, you have administrators now, fighting tooth and nail on something that even they don't have all of the information on. So, go ahead, Joe.
It's interesting to me, because anytime I hear somebody saying, well, you just don't know, or talking about how the person is ignorant, like you said, the teacher telling the kids that their parent is I guess, stupid, that when that when that continues, what it tells me is the person doesn't have answers and they're hiding behind those phrases. So if you have somebody who is pro-Common Core and says, well, you just don't understand, or you're just a conspiracy theorist, have them explain it, because I don't think they can. The rationale behind Common Core, beyond just, well, we want to make sure that the kids are taught according to rigorous standards, because there isn't any rigor behind them at all. It's just overly complicated. So if you hear somebody that is using phrases like that, I'm fully willing to confront people when that's part of my job, when they're using things like that, and having them explain it to me. If I'm ignorant, then please explain it to me, because I don't want to be ignorant. What is the benefit of this? Can you describe how this is going to better my child developmentally? My child right now is very, very frustrated and says that he doesn't understand math or doesn't understand English. Can you explain to me how this present mode of teaching is better than what we were learning before? I haven't found anybody that can really explain that other than, oh, you're just believing according to some sort of conspiracy that's out there.
They definitely have talking points that they use to answer those questions, and I know that teachers are given those talking points. They're told exactly how to answer to parents. And I as a teacher, I wear my tinfoil hat proudly.
Well, it's I really do think that it's going to be coming down to numbers. That if parents are not scared to ask tough questions, not afraid to confront misinformation, if they're confident, then that's the way the tide can turn. But my concern is we're going to have parents that are believing the junk that's being shoveled out there and not asking questions, and that's where we're going to continue having a problem, because like I said, this is going nationwide, whether somebody wants to believe it or not. It is going to be a national test. It is going to be a national curriculum, and the rationale that's going to be stated is, well, it worked so well that we want to make sure as a nation we are able to perform at a level that China and other foreign countries are able to perform at, and this is the way. When not everybody is being taught that way. Why in the world does Bill Gates not have his child going to a school that teaches Common Core when he was one of the major funders of this whole movement? So it is going to go in that direction, whether people want to acknowledge that at all. And the other problem you have, because yes, there are good teachers that are leaving, and similar to any business or profession that's out there, you have people that are just called to do what they're doing, that special teacher that all of us remember, the ones that are truly gifted in teaching. And then we all remember the ones that were not particularly good at teaching, that maybe they're there just to get a paycheck, their heart is not in it, or maybe they just don't have the ability to be able to reach kids. Those kids or those teachers will likely stay in the system, and the teachers that are gifted will be leaving the public school system and going private. I'm hoping they put together if they can put together a school that's non-Common Core with all the teachers that are leaving. I'd love to know about it, because
we're working on it, Joe. We're working on it, and it's going to be in your neighborhood too. So
okay.
We're working on it. We're definitely working on it. Anybody else have a question? No
well,
other
if nobody else has one, I have a follow-up.
Go ahead.
My son is being issued an iPad along with the rest of his school next year, and I'm curious what you think about children having so much screen time, and instead of learning from other kids, they're using apps, and they're on Study Island and Edmodo and all the other online things at school, and they're expected to do that at home too. And I'm curious what you think about the growing trend for doing that.
Well, I mean, it certainly takes away the socialization part of learning. I think, learning from another student or a teacher face-to-face can't be replaced at all. People learn much better when it's face-to-face. Plus, you're learning social skills that will be used in your everyday life. If you're just staring at a screen, you're not picking up on social cues. You're also being overstimulated because the kids will be then at school on the iPads, and then they'll come home and they'll do something on their computer or the phone. And kids are just too plugged in these days. They need to. I would love for basically the smartphones to be thrown away, just because they're causing so much damage socially. So I think that's a problem there that can be developed.
Yeah, we're seeing it, and there was a picture floating around of a classroom full of kindergartners sitting in a circle on the rug, and every one of them was on an iPad, not talking to each other, not listening to a story, but each one was doing their own thing on their iPad. I'm a firm believer that you can have technology classes, but you certainly don't need to be using one-on-one technology until you hit high school.
The Gates and the Jobs children don't.
Huh?
The Gates and the Jobs children don't use technology like that. They go to schools that do not use technology.
Oh, yeah,
and
most of the schools.
At home.
Yeah, most of the schools in Silicon Valley do not have technology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That'll tell you something.
Yep, absolutely. Any other questions? Joe, thank you so much.
Sure.
If anybody has a question they would like for me to forward to Joe, I'd be happy to do that. In the meantime, we're going to sign this off and send it off so that we can edit it and have the recording available to anybody who couldn't listen tonight, or you can share it with a friend who may need to hear something that was that we went over. Joe, thank you again. You are priceless, and I am absolutely so incredibly grateful for everything that you do, and for the kids and the teachers that you are helping, and by extension, all those that you are helping through these conference calls and through the videos that you've done for us, and loaning us even your child, who is what is his official title now? The State Optimist.
Oh, the Optimist International.
Optimist International State Oratory Champion.
Oracle. Yes. Uh-huh.
He is a phenomenal young man, and we appreciate him as well. So good night, everybody. Thank you again, Joe, and
thank you.
And thank everybody for joining us. And good night.
Bye. Thanks.